The following true time-slip story happened on the 14th of August 1996 to Alan Gammon, a bus driver from Kent in England. On a warm August evening, Alan Gammon was driving his bus from Reigate to Sevenoaks in southeast England. When he drove out of the bus station and turned into the high street, on his right he noticed a bright star shining in the night sky. The star seemed to be keeping up with his movements along the route out of town. When he arrived at a small roundabout at Sundridge, the star was directly in front of him. After turning left, it should have again been seen on his right, just behind him. It wasn't. It was just ahead. As he drove along the road, it disappeared totally from sight. He then progressed along the road in total darkness. No street lights or oncoming traffic. He headed toward Bessells Green. But as he travelled about a quarter of a mile, he saw what appeared to be the bright star, very low, and appeared to be level with the road surface. As he drove nearer and nearer, it became larger and larger, until he drove into it. As he entered the light, the road surface changed. The bus rocked from side to side, and the road surface suddenly changed and became rough. He immediately slowed down to a stop on the side of the road, where his nearest front wheel rested in a pothole directly outside the King's Head Public House in Kent. But the pub didn't look right. It looked dowdy and appeared to be floodlit. He figured a film crew was shooting a movie and straight away looked around to see if there was any others, but there was no one there. As he looked around, he could see that the cottages in the village had dim candle lights shining in some of the windows. He saw in the background what appeared to be a large church with candle lights flickering behind the stained glass. He then heard the clip-clop of horses' hooves and saw a horse and open cart slowly walking towards the pub. The cart had people sitting either side facing one another on a wooden bench-type seat, laughing between themselves and seemed very happy. The ladies wore flat caps and white blouses. The men wore jackets, white shirts and ordinary trousers. The colour of the material for the jackets, skirts and flat caps were all the same colour, a brownish green. The material looked like a type of tweed. They appeared to be people who may have worked on a farm, ending the day in a pub after a hard day's work. When the cart pulled up, the driver stepped down and walked behind the back of the cart to help the ladies off of a short ladder, who one by one went into the pub. One lady, who was still sitting in the car while the others were getting off, appeared to look straight at him. The door to the pub was ajar, and as they pushed the door to go in, they seemed to step over a wooden beam which ran along the bottom of the door. He could hear the door slam after each person went through. This made him think the door was kept closed by a spring. While this was going on, he thought he'd try to get a better view and then open the bus door to go outside. But an inner voice in his head said, "If you go outside, you won't come back. Stay where you are." He then looked to his right to see the sun setting across the fields. As he turned his head to look at the pub, his inner voice said, "You have seen enough, it's time to go." He put the bus in gear and slowly drove off the rough road, where it seemed to hit a small step as the bus went onto tarmac and into the darkness. The running time for that route was tight, and he knew without looking at his watch he was running very late. He was so excited at what he experienced that he could not wait to tell someone what he had seen. But then that little voice said, "Don't tell anyone." When he looked at his watch to check the time, he was shocked to see that it was early. He clocked off and went home. The next day, out of curiosity, he decided to visit the pub, bought a pint of beer and looked around. A few regulars were in, and he listened to the chatter, waiting to pick up a conversation about what he'd witnessed the evening before, as he figured it would have been the talking point of the village. He heard no reference to this whatsoever. The following week, he bought a local newspaper to see if anyone had written about it. No one had. He then realised he was the only one to have seen it. But what was it? What really happened that warm summer evening? He kept his silence on what happened that night for more than 5 years. He never even told his family. What he saw must have been a chance in a million, that he was in the right place at the right time. Some years later, he was reading about ley lines and their significance along the road he was driving on. Ley lines are lines that crisscross around the globe, like latitudinal and longitudinal lines that are dotted with monuments and natural landforms and carry along with them rivers of supernatural energy. He began to believe what he saw was a build-up of energy from a ley line. In 2006, he revisited the pub with a friend where he'd told his story. They'd discussed what he'd experienced, and the first question was, why could he see the pub from the bus as there is a tree behind his line of view? Well, the simple answer was that the tree had not even been planted when he was there that evening. Secondly, why could he see the sun setting across the fields if there were houses and trees across the road? Because the houses he could now see had not been built. Thirdly, how was it that the lady who looked straight at him didn't appear to see him? Because he wasn't born and the bus hadn't been built. He was invisible to all. The final question is, why wasn't he late back to the garage? Somehow, time had stopped for those few minutes. But what was the significance of the star that seemed to be tracking the bus? Was there a connection or just a coincidence? He concluded that somehow he had gone back some 100 years in time. He also asked the question, if he had stopped outside and just ignored the inner voice, would he have been trapped in the past and not been able to get back? He takes this question a little further and wonders whether people who disappear without a trace and experience what he did ignored that inner voice and stepped into the past, never to be seen again.